The LMC casts a wide net over the Sound Shore to bring you local event info, profiles, and conversations. Recorded in the heart of the village in Mamaroneck Cinemas at the studio on the Avenue, LMC Media brings you the LMC Cast Community Profiles.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the LMC Cast, coming to you from the beautiful studio on the Avenue, right at Mamaroneck Cinemas. My name is Jason Summers, and I'll be today's host. And I am thrilled to introduce our special guest today. He is an expert in CPR training and the owner of Breathe CPR courses right here in Mamaroneck. This is Charles Smith. Charles, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I'm really thrilled to be able to talk to you. Charles and I got a chance to speak by the telephone yesterday to have a little pre-interview, and he is a fascinating person with a lot to say and a lot to talk about. So I'm going to jump in with some general questions about CPR, sure, because I think most people don't really know what CPR is. I think there's we see the Hollywood version sometimes, and
yes,
I don't know that that's reality.
It is not.
Can you speak to maybe the more general idea of what CPR is and when it's used and all of that?
Sure. All right. Well, the first order of business, I guess what I have to explain is, because most people don't actually know what CPR stands for.
That's right.
Right? So CPR stands for cardiac pulmonary resuscitation, which means once you collapse, the only thing I care about is whether or not you have a heartbeat and if you're breathing. That's it at the end of it. Doesn't matter what did that to you.
Right.
That's what I care about. Right. That's number one. Two, the reason why you do CPR is because everybody we do CPR on is dead. They're unresponsive, they're not breathing, and they do not have a pulse. This is another misconception that I got to deal with. Most people think that when you do CPR on a person that they're actually alive. They're not alive, not by a long shot. They are dead, unresponsive, not breathing, no pulse. Just for clarity, life is defined by whether or not you have a pulse. It is not defined by brain activity. Your heart is the only organ in your body that is not controlled by your brain. The reason why everyone knows this is because if you're brain dead, you'd be dead.
Right.
Your heart continues to beat.
Right.
So the reason why you're doing CPR is to create blood flow, to prevent brain death, heart muscle loss, and to keep the blood from clotting. What people also have to understand, what they also have to understand, is that you can't hurt somebody when you're doing CPR on somebody because they're already dead. You can't kill them.
Right.
So you can feel light. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you go for it.
Sure.
Do the chest compressions. Listen, if you're doing chest compressions, right, and you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, and you pop a rib, you hear pop, right, and the person goes, ow! That's a good thing, yeah.
Right.
Stop
right.
CPR.
Right.
Right? Because when we do our classes, I try to instill in people that the person is actually dead.
You know, I feel like in the first 2 minutes of this interview, I've learned more about science than I did in biology class in high school. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So are there differences between CPR? We hear the word first aid. We hear AED sometimes wrapped up in this. Can you just kind of define what all those differences are? What are the different categories that we're talking about?
Okay. So when you do your patient assessment to determine whether or not you're going to do CPR, right, you're going to go through one of two doors. Unresponsive, not breathing, you do CPR because that person's dead. Unresponsive, breathing, you do first aid. So first aid is for the living, CPR is for the dead.
Got it.
If I'm doing first aid on you, you're alive.
Okay.
You're breathing. You're either sitting in a chair and you need first aid, or you're laying on the floor and you fainted and you need first aid, but you're breathing. That's the difference between the two. They're not one and the same. The automated external defibrillator, otherwise known as the AED, corrects abnormal cardiac electrical activity. That's what that's for.
Okay.
So when you're doing CPR, there's 3 treatments, right, that do 3 different things. Chest compressions is for circulation. Giving 2 breaths, if you're going to give 2 breaths, is for oxygenating the bloodstream. Now, just for people that are out there that go, but Charles, you only exhale CO2. I know you saw, Apollo 13 or whatever. I know what happened, right?
This is where we get our science, Charles, from blockbuster movies, right?
Hollywood. But there's 21% oxygen in the air we breathe, and we exhale 16% oxygen. So when you give the 2 breaths, you're giving that person 16% oxygen, and you're circulating that oxygenated blood. The AED is the most important part of CPR. Here's the reason why. People don't come back from CPR if they're in cardiac arrest. and I just want to say this. I use cardiac arrest and dead intermittently. They mean exactly the same thing. If you're in cardiac arrest, you're dead. The only way to correct the abnormal rhythm, which is called ventricular fibrillation, right? And the definition of the word fibrillation simply means a muscle that's twitching.
Okay.
So if your eye ever did this, your eye fibrillated. If your thigh ever did this, your thigh fibrillated. Well, your heart is also a muscle. So when you go into ventricular fibrillation, you have to use the machine that's named after the rhythm. The automated external defibrillator
Right.
corrects ventricular fibrillation. And we have no other science. There's no other science to fix ventricular fibrillation except for defibrillation.
And we see these machines pretty often. We see them hanging in schools sometimes. Is the training for CPR connected to that? So when you get CPR training, you're also being trained on that machine as well?
Absolutely 100%. You have to be. Because if you can defibrillate somebody within the first 10 minutes of them going into cardiac arrest, there's a 78% chance they'll survive.
Wow.
When you only do CPR, it's a 5% chance that they're going to survive.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was that divergent.
Oh, yeah. So the AED is 100% part of the training because it has to be.
And I know when we spoke by phone yesterday, you mentioned the defibrillator needing to be in certain places. When sports teams are going to the field, you mentioned that coaches need to bring this machine by law.
By law.
And how did that come about? Why is that part of the process?
Well, what happened is in 2002, there was a kid on Long Island named Lewis. I forgot his last name. And he was playing lacrosse. He was 16 years old, and he got hit in the chest with the lacrosse ball. That trauma to the chest put him in ventricular fibrillation. So the coaches, they went to work. They did 30 chest compressions in 2 breaths, 30 chest compressions in 2 breaths, but they didn't have an AED on the field. They didn't have a defibrillator.
Okay.
So Lewis died.
Okay.
So then what happens? Tragedy happens. We create laws. So they created what's called the Lewis Law. And that law started out as at every organized sporting event for children, there has to be an AED on the field. Or there should be an ambulance there. One of the two. Both coaches are supposed to bring the AEDs to the game. And both coaches are supposed to be trained in CPR. That law later got extended that all schools have to have AEDs. So every school in New York has AEDs in them, at least one.
Right. Well, that's what I meant when we see them hanging on the wall.
Absolutely.
And so I'm going to use this to kind of pivot into another conversation because we're talking about children and we're talking about bringing it to a field. Sure. I know there's always some conversation about how young you can do CPR on someone, and often infants are brought into that conversation.
Sure.
So can you maybe talk about what are the situations where you would use CPR on an infant? And for the purpose of CPR, what is that age definition? Because I know that the word infant can mean different things to different people, but I think there's a specific definition when it comes to CPR.
Sure. An infant is anybody from the ages from 0 to 1 is an infant. A child is 1 to puberty. Puberty is not determined by age. Puberty is determined by secondary sexual characteristics. Breast development on girls, hair on boys.
Right.
Once you have secondary sexual characteristics, you are considered to be an adult because you have adult vitals.
Right.
Right? Can you defibrillate an infant? Yes, you can defibrillate an infant because if the infant is in VFib, the only way to correct VFib is defib. Yes, you can defibrillate a child. Same thing. And yes, you can defibrillate an adult. In other words, everybody gets the juice.
Right.
Everybody gets it. Yes.
And there are different approaches when you're dealing with a child and an infant and an adult to some degree?
The approach is based on body size.
Okay.
Right? If you're defibrillating, first of all, when you put the pads on using an AED, it's lefty low, righty high, right?
Okay.
So the pads can't touch. On an infant, the pads, you can't even get 2 pads on an infant.
Right.
So you put 1 pad on the front of the infant and 1 pad on the back.
Okay.
That's the difference. But the infant still gets defibrillated. Same thing goes for a child, based on body mass. If the child can tolerate lefty low, righty high, and the pads don't touch, cool. If they do touch, front and back.
Wow. Okay. And so now that we're talking about some of the specifics about how to go about this, I'd love to talk about your company, Breathe CPR, which is located here in Mamaroneck. Is that correct?
Absolutely. We're at 129 Halstead Avenue. which is right off of the avenue here, right across the street from the train. As soon as you get off, you can walk right into Breathe CPR. We're very convenient.
I'm down. I live down the street from there, so it's very convenient.
Yes.
So tell me about the different courses that you offer.
Sure. We started the company back in 2011. We moved up here about in April, like March, April. We moved up here, and what happened was Kim, who you've seen probably many Google reviews.
Yes, we'll get to the Google reviews in a little while.
Her and her friend opened an office, and we took the back part of the office to start Breathe CPR Mamaroneck. So that's what we did. What was the other question you had?
So maybe to talk about some of the courses that you offer.
Of course. Okay, so we are an American Heart Association training site. What that means is that we are capable of actually generating the certificate the same day. So I make the actual certificate for the American Heart Association. It's an official certificate. We offer basic life support, which is for medical professionals. All medical professionals have to have basic life support. Then we have advanced cardiac life support. This is an advanced class that's amended with CPR, right? So what happens with that, that's when we get into pushing medications while doing CPR. This is when we get into teaching intubation techniques.
And those are for medical professionals as well?
That's medical professionals. So those will be like ER doctors, stuff like that they have what we call advanced cardiac life support. I teach them how to read EKGs so that they know when to defibrillate, right? And we teach them various cardiac and how to treat different cardiac arrhythmias, AFib, VTach, A-flutter, supraventricular tachycardia. They learn all those things too. So that's advanced cardiac life support. Then we have pediatric advanced life support, which is that's for medical professionals that work like in peds departments, right? And with that, they learn about respiratory and problems with the respiratory system because kids don't have heart attacks.
Right.
It's always respiratory. So they learned about respiratory distress, respiratory failure, respiratory arrest, and what that is and how to treat it. You know, obviously we teach choking. I teach IV certification, how to get, medical professional. I teach telemetry, which is EKG recognition at more advanced level than just what we do in the ACLS class.
Okay.
How to do a 12-lead EKG. I teach all that stuff.
And that's for those are all for medical professionals, people who are actually in this profession, and they have to seek out these classes as part of their training.
Absolutely. And then for the non-medical professionals, we have what's called Heart Saver CPR AED, and that's for everybody. That's for anybody that's interested. And then we also have pediatric CPR AED, and that's usually what nannies get, or if they're in not daycare centers. What do you call those? I guess daycare.
Daycare.
Right? Yeah, daycare.
Sure.
Yeah. When they have the infants, they do pediatric life CPR AED. So yeah.
So. And I think I mentioned this to you when we spoke previously by phone. I got certified in CPR years ago, and I had not a great experience in the class that I took. I felt that it was not very hands-on, and even though I got the certification, I left kind of feeling like I really wasn't prepared for any kind of situation that would come up. So what about your courses kind of sets you apart? What makes you different from maybe the experience I had or some of the experiences that other people may have had with this before?
Okay, number one is it's Kim. That's number one. She'll make you feel comfortable. But what makes us different is we don't just tell you how to do CPR. We tell you why you're doing it. That's way more important than how, right? If you know why you're doing something, it sticks. Now you understand, right? If I tell you that every 60 seconds that the heart's not beating, 10% of the heart muscle dies. Every 60 seconds. In 4 minutes, 40% of the heart muscle is dead.
Right.
Here's what I've just communicated to you. I'm not the first responder. You're the first responder. The ambulance is the second responder, and the hospital is the third responder. If you don't do what you got to do, after 10 minutes, it's probably not going to work out because the heart muscle is dead 100%, and they're permanently brain dead. Because brain death starts 4 to 6 minutes once a person goes into cardiac arrest. That brain death is reversible.
Okay.
6 to 12 minutes, brain death becomes irreversible. With that knowledge right there, that lets you know the gravity of the class, and that you no longer have license to go, don't touch him. Don't touch him. No.
Right.
If somebody collapses, you got to touch him. You got to see if they're responsive.
And the clock is running, and
the
there's
clock is
urgency.
running. There's urgency. So what we bring to the class is the urgency. A lot of instructors don't like to bring the urgency. A couple of reasons. One, a lot of instructors have never done CPR.
Right.
I've done it, and
Right.
I've been doing it, right? I've done it on 10 people when I wasn't working on the ambulance. 8 of them survived. 2 did not. So that's the understanding that we try to bring to the situation and the gravity of what it means. And that's why I tell them that they're dead.
Right.
Can't kill them.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So
that takes some pressure off, I think.
That takes a lot of pressure
Right.
off. When we teach them the AED, they think that they're actually doing the shocking. You're not the one doing the shocking, because an automated external defibrillator will never, ever shock anybody that's generating a pulse.
There you go.
That's why you can defibrillate an infant,
Right.
or a child, or an adult.
Right.
Once you put it on, if that child, infant, or adult has a pulse, it will say no shock advised.
Right.
And you can mash the button. I'm going to hit the button anyway because I'm bugging. I want to check it out, right? It's not an on-off switch.
Right.
As long as they have a pulse, it won't fire off. If it does light up, that means the person is in VFib, because it only shocks VFib.
Now, you mentioned chest compressions earlier a few times, and you did bring an example here with yourself today. I'd love to just see even just a brief example of what they would be learning in terms of the chest compression and how that's approached.
Sure. Well, first order of business is knowing where the heart's located.
Good.
Your heart's located. Yeah. Your heart's not located on the left side. It's located in the center of your chest.
Okay.
And if you ever want to figure out how to find your placement, what you do is you take your fingers and you put them under your underarm, and you draw a line straight across, and you stop right in the center. See right here?
Okay.
That's where your heart's located.
Nice.
Your underarms always line up with your heart.
I'm telling you, I'm learning more than I ever learned in a biology class in this 20 minutes.
Right?
It's crazy.
So then I'm going to come over here.
Please do, yes.
I'll do this thing. So this mannequin's kind of special because he lights up when we do our thing. So I line up, place the heel of my hand in the center of the chest bone, elbows straight and stiff. We do CPR with our body weight, not with our arms. And you count. Going 2 inches deep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. And as you can see, there's circulation going to the brain.
Right.
That's what you're doing.
Right.
Come on, try it out.
Oh boy.
Let's
Now
do
the
it.
test is on here.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's do it.
All right. So
Heel your hand in the center of the breastbone. Lock your fingers together. Elbows straight and stiff. I'm going to count with you. You ready?
okay, I'm ready.
I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, go.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. And that's 30 chest compressions. And you maintain circulation.
Right.
The blood was going to the brain. I saw it.
Right.
This mannequin's sensitive to that.
Right.
So if I do the chest compressions too fast, right, the brain doesn't light up.
You can see it. Right.
If I do it too slow, the brain doesn't light up. So the fact that you were doing it meant that you were doing it right.
Right. Right.
Now, if you want to give 2 breaths, you pinch the nose, tilt the head back, do what's called the head tilt chin lift method, and you connect and you give them 2 breaths. And that's basic
Right.
on how it works.
And that's more than I got to do when I took that CPR class. And that's I think what I think makes your classes so special, from what I've read and from what I've seen and from what I've talked to you about, that there really is hands-on approach here.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to embarrass you just a little bit and read some of these Google reviews because I think it's important for everyone to know just how warm and wonderful this group is. So I have here, in all my years getting CPR certified, never has a class made it so applicable and relevant. Kim explained the why of the procedures at hand and is clearly driven by a mission to help people in real life. And that's what you pointed out before. It's the why. It's knowing why you're doing what you're doing. And you've already explained so much of that to me today. That's really fantastic. And I know I asked you on the phone yesterday, and I'd love for you to talk about this. Who do you think should learn CPR?
Oh, yeah. So I think that here's what I know. Everybody dies. So everybody in the world should do CPR because we do CPR on dead people. Everybody dies.
Right.
So everyone should know CPR.
Right.
Matter of fact, you shouldn't even be able to get a driver's license unless you take a CPR class. CPR should be taught in the high schools. It shouldn't be a skill that you pick up later because it's really a life skill that one day you might need. And I just want to be clear. CPR and choking are two different things.
Right.
Choking is first aid.
Because they're still alive.
Well, yeah, because they're still alive.
Yep.
That is correct. Choking is first aid. They're not breathing, but they're still alive. Yes.
And to kind of point out why it's so important that everybody learns CPR, I know you've had a few experiences in your life where you have done CPR, not as an EMT, not as an ambulance driver or anything like that, but you've been in kind of the right place at the right time. Yeah. And I know you have a few stories like that. And I think it's important for people to hear those stories because it really points out the fact that you weren't in an official capacity in these moments. You were a person with a skill who was able to help at a very important time. So shall we start with the Shea Stadium story?
Sure, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that'll work, yeah. So we had gone, it was about I think it was 2016, and I forgot the pitcher's name because I'm sorry, I'm not a Mets fan, I'm a Yankees fan. But I happened to be at the game hanging out. And we had left the stadium, and as we were walking out, a friend of mine, his name is Ralph, he goes, Charles, they're doing chest compressions on that lady over there, which was by the apple, where they have the apple with the hat.
Right.
And I looked and I said, oh, wow. I said, okay. So I went over, I introduced myself. I said, my name is Charles Smith. I'm a CPR instructor. I'm going to help your mom. And I jumped in and I started to do the chest compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, anybody that knows me knows I'm not giving breath. I'm not giving mouth to mouth. I don't do that. I'm not saying that you're not supposed to. The AHA never said don't give mouth to mouth. Mouth to mouth is personal, right? I don't know what's happening. First of all, mouth to mouth, you can get hepatitis A, B, C, HIV, tuberculosis, meningitis, herpes, and now COVID, yes?
Right.
So I don't know what's happening, right? So I'm doing the chest compressions. When I got to 30, I told the son, give your mother 2 breaths. I opened the airway, I pinched your nose, because he didn't know the skill.
Right.
I said, connect with your mom and give her 2 breaths. And that's how we did. Then Stadium EMS came. There were a bunch of kids. They were all like in their early 20s, and they had never managed a cardiac arrest before. So they were all freaked out, right? Wow. So I'm doing the chest compressions. I'm getting tired. I tell one of the kids, I said, come on, start chest compressions. And they started doing it. They were doing it too fast. And they're going, and I said, you're going too fast. He goes, well, I'm going to work for the fire department or something, he said. And I said, listen, I don't have time to explain this to you. I'm a paramedic. Slow down. You're not allowing for circulation. You're not allowing for what we call complete chest recoil. He caught the language, and then he slowed down. I went to the head of the patient, and we had the ambu bag, which is that bag that we squeeze on the ambulance. The person that had the ambu bag, who was also another EMT, I said, all right, Mom. I said, put the ambu bag together. And she's looking at it, and she doesn't know how to put it together because she's never put it together.
And this is an EMT?
This is
person?
an EMT.
Wow.
So I grabbed the bag. I said, give me the bag. I grabbed the bag, and I put it in there, and I put the mask on, put it on the lady. I give her 2 breaths. He's doing 30 chest compressions. I tell the girl once again, I said, I need you to put the AED on her, put the pads on. And she doesn't know she didn't know where the pads go. She didn't know the location of the pads. I'm going to attest it that, number 1, they've never been in an emergency. 2, they were kids, and they were probably fresh out of school.
Right.
And they never thought that they would be in this situation. So I put the pads on the lady, and we stood back, let it analyze, and it said no shock advised. Now, no shock advised could mean she had a pulse, or it could mean that she's a flatline.
Okay.
We don't defibrillate flat lines. We only do that for TV. So in my mind, I go, wow, okay, she might be super dead. Okay. So we go back to the chest compressions, 2 breaths. All of a sudden, she opens her eyes and she takes a breath. And she gasps, right? So now the first order of business when someone comes back is you check their mental status.
Okay.
So you ask them questions. So I asked her, I said, Mama, what's your name? She said, my name is Mary. I said, okay. I looked at her son. I said, is that your mother's name? She said, yes. Because, I don't know.
Right.
I said, do you know where you are, Mary? She said, yes. I'm in Shea Stadium. That is an appropriate answer for her age, right?
Right.
Kids call it Citi Field.
Right.
We call it Shea Stadium.
Shea Stadium,
right?
Exactly.
So I was like, all right, cool. And I said, do you know what year it is? And she said, yeah, it's 2016. And she said, I have to ask you a question. I said, what, Mary? She said, are you wearing a Yankee cap? I said, yes, I'm wearing a Yankee cap. She said, are you a Yankees fan? I said, yes, Mary, I'm a Yankees fan. She said, oh, my God, you should have let me die. I can't believe I'm with a Yankees fan. And I asked the son, I said, is that how your mother talks? He said, yep. I said, okay, she's back. We good to go. She was her Yankee-hating self, even
Right
though
away.
I say all the way, right? But here's what I knew. She was back. No brain damage. She was snappy and she was popping, and she was there.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, and then the news came to interview me, but it wasn't Channel 2 or Channel 4 or Channel 7. It was Univision. It was,
Okay.
So they were doing it in Spanish, like, CPR, and here is Senor Carlos Smith. Go. And I'm like, I need a translator. So, there's actually a clip, though, of me actually explaining what I did.
But that's amazing that in that moment there were people who were professionals who could not take on the situation.
That happens a lot.
That's really,
people don't realize that.
And it's even more important then for all of us to get into these classes. I think we have time. I'm going to ask you to tell one more story.
Sure.
Because you also mentioned having to do this on an airplane at one time.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big Hollywood thing, right? When there's something happening on an airplane and you're calling for a doctor. So I'd love to hear the real story as opposed to a Hollywood version of what might have happened.
So I was on my way flying to Hong Kong, and I was hanging out. I'm a very nervous flyer. So there was a lady that was sitting next to me, and we were talking. I was mostly doing the talking, and she was just kind of ignoring me, And all of a sudden, you heard over the PA, are there any medical professionals in the house? Now, I'm a nervous flyer, so I'm thinking in my mind, my God, it might be the captain, right? So I jump up out of the seat, and she goes, what are you, a doctor or something? I said, shut up, I don't have any time for you. The captain might be in trouble. So I go running to the back of the plane. So I go to the back of the plane, and there's a guy in the plane, and there's a guy in the bathroom, and he had vomited on himself. He was unresponsive. He wasn't breathing. We pull him out, right? And then a cardiologist showed up. A cardiologist intern showed up, and a nurse showed up, and then there was me. So I said to the stewardess, I said, Mama, do you have an AED? And she goes, what's that? Right.
Wow.
And they're trained in CPR, by the way. I said, the shocky thing? She said, yeah, we got the shocky thing. I said, Mom, you got any medical stuff? She says, yeah, we got medical stuff. I said, you know what? Bring me your medical stuff, right? In emergencies, sometimes you got to meet people where they are.
That's right. That's right. Your
So
brain's not always clicking at that
bring me
point.
the medical stuff, And what happened with this dude, we put the pads on him and everything. And the AED analyzed, and I was able to see the EKG, and this person actually had a pulse going on. But he was unresponsive, right? So what we did was I elevated his feet 6 to 12 inches off of the ground to treat him for shock. I told the nurse, I said, let's get an IV line going.
Right.
She got an IV line going, put the IV in. The back of the plane looked like a triage. It looked like a hospital.
Wow.
With all the stuff we had going on.
Wow.
I worked on this dude in this situation for about 4 hours before he actually came back.
Wow.
He drank alcohol and took Ambien. Don't do that. Alcohol and Ambien. Don't do it. It's a bad combination.
You heard it here. Heard it here.
So he OD'd.
Wow.
And
but 4 hours, I mean, that is commitment.
he didn't come around for 4 hours.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Then when I went back to when we got him back,
Right.
Hong Kong's an 18-hour flight. So I'm walking past the seat, and I look at the lady like, yeah. And they take me to first class.
Very nice.
Yeah. So I was in
nice.
first class for the whole flight.
I wouldn't suggest that as a way to get an upgrade, though.
No, I got 30,000 miles. It was beautiful.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Charles, I just want you one more time to mention the address of Breathe CPR and maybe the website so that people know where to look this up.
Sure. 129 Halstead Avenue here in Mamaroneck is the address. The website is breathecpr.org. And you can see all the classes listed and the video that you saw. And what else were you asking?
No, just we want that information so that people can run right away to their computer and sign up for a course.
Yeah, do it right now. We have our people on standby to take your calls. I'm just joking.
Right.
breathecpr.org, and choose what class you want. All right.
Well, you've convinced me, Charles, and it's been wonderful speaking with you. And thank you so much for everything that you do for our community. We
Absolutely.
really appreciate it.
It's good to be here in Mamaroneck.
Thank you so much.
Right.
And thank you for joining us for this LMC cast, and we hope to see you back with us another time. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the LMC Cast Community Profiles, produced at LMC Media's studio on the Avenue. Visit lmcmedia.org to book your time in this state-of-the-art convenient location, walkable from the Metro North train station on Mamaroneck Avenue. You can also support this nonprofit media center at lmcmedia.org/donate.